Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for listening to another episode of Dogman Encounters Radio. I'm Vic Cundiff, and I'll be your host for the show. Before we bring on tonight's guest, if you've had a Dogman encounter and would like to speak with me about it, whether in private or on the show, please go to dogmanencounters.com and submit a report. I'd love to hear from you. If you've had a Sasquatch sighting and would like to be a guest on Bigfoot Eyewitness Radio, please go to bigfooteyewitness.com and submit a report. All right, let's bring on tonight's guest. Tonight's guest is Cindi. Cindi, welcome to the show.
Hi, Vic. I'm so happy to be here and to have the opportunity to speak with you.
Well, we're so happy to have you here. Thank you for your time and thanks for coming on.
You're very welcome.
We do appreciate it. Cindi, please give us a brief bio on yourself.
Okay, well, I am going to be 49 next month, but everybody thinks I'm in my 30s. Sorry, that sounds vain, but I'm a single mom. I have a 10-year-old son and a 23-year-old daughter. I've always or used to love hiking, camping, whitewater rafting, painting, just being very active. But since my encounters, I think I've kind of cut down on a lot of my outdoor activities, but I love life and I work full time and enjoy being a mom, and relocated to Texas a couple years ago and just enjoying life and trying to do the best we can.
Well, as you know, that's all you can do, and it sounds to me like you've carved out a really good life for yourself.
I'm trying. Thank you.
You're welcome. Cindi, you're no stranger to the woods or the animals that live there. To help drive home the point that your first encounter wasn't a case of mistaken identity, please tell us more about that.
Oh, absolutely. I come from a family of hunters. I had one grandfather that was a farmer, one that was a rancher. So, and growing up in the Pacific Northwest, I know what a cougar is. I know what their paw prints look like. I didn't exactly hunt myself, but, being out in nature, deer, bears. I'm very familiar with the wildlife and what deer sound like, and I love animals and, grew up. My earliest memory was riding my horse bareback at 3 and 4 years old and falling off of it in the mud. And so I'm very familiar. I love the outdoors. I love animals. I'm very familiar with, the different species. And there's just no way this was a mistaken identity of anything at all.
Oh, no, of course it wasn't. With your credentials that you bring to the table in the woods, there's no way that could have been the case. But unlike most guests who've been on this show, you'd been listening to the show for years before you had your first encounter. What more can you tell us about that?
Yes, Vic, I was fortunate enough, which I consider it a blessing. I started listening to your show. My encounter was in 2018, and I believe I started listening to your show a couple years before that, I think 2016, somewhere in there. So although I hadn't ever seen a dogman, I did believe they existed. There's way too many encounters, too many authentic people. So even though I hadn't seen one, I did believe that cryptids existed, Bigfoot, Dogmen, etc. So absolutely, I was no stranger, and it was definitely a blessing to have that knowledge before my encounter.
Do you think it kind of softened the blow when you did have that encounter, considering your knowledge of dogmen before you had it?
It did soften the blow, absolutely. But most of the encounters I heard were very fearful. So in some ways it made it kind of, I think, almost difficult for me to accept, because mine wasn't as, scary. I didn't feel the dogman, threatened us as much as I've heard others. But it definitely, yes, I knew right away what it was. Absolutely helped. And I was thankful that I had that information before my encounter.
Oh, I'm glad that you did know about them, and like you said, it helped. That's a good thing. For the listeners who think you just had dogmen on the brain and that you mistakenly thought you had an encounter, what would you say to them about that?
They were absolutely wrong. I was born in the Pacific Northwest, Oregon. I was living in Central Oregon, and I had had some experience with Bigfoot. And honestly, I thought if I was going to have a Dogman encounter, it would have been in the Pacific Northwest. But I was not out searching to have an encounter for Dogman. When I moved to the Dallas-Fort Worth area, that was the farthest thing from my mind, was trying to search for a Dogman or a Dogman encounter. The Dogman encounter, honestly, was the furthest from my mind. It was my son who pointed it out. So it wasn't even me that seen it first. He has heard probably a little bit of, episodes here and there, but it's not like we sat around as a family and listened to he usually didn't want to listen to it because it kind of scared him, the thought of these big creatures being out in the woods. And it was him that pointed it out. So it wasn't even, myself that seen it first. I wish Dogman, weren't real. To be truthful, they're very scary creatures, but they are definitely real.
Yeah, they are, and I definitely wish they weren't around also. After having listened to the show for such a long time, what surprised you most about what it was like to actually talk with me about your encounters?
Well, I just want to thank you, first of all. I mean, I always heard people say how better they felt after talking to you and how wonderful, and I'm not saying I didn't believe them, but after speaking with you, I just didn't realize it just helped me, and it helped me realize, and I was able to be vulnerable, because being a single mom, through the encounter, I felt like I had to be strong, because if I freaked out, my son would have freaked out. And so you have such empathy and genuine care about people. I was able to be vulnerable with you and, maybe be weak, for lack of better words, and just be open about my encounter and my feelings. And it was amazing, because I'd realized it had traumatized me, even though I guess I was kind of in denial of that, and I had some fear about talking about my encounter, because it was a little different than I think most. So I slept so good last night, the first time since the encounter, and it was like this big weight had been lifted off my shoulders. And so anyone listening, if you've seen a Dogman, even if you don't want to be on Vic's show, speak with him, because it really does help, and he really does care. And thank you very much, Vic.
Oh, you're welcome. You are welcome. And you'll never know how happy that makes me to hear that our conversation helped you so much. That's why I do this, so that's great to hear.
Yes, and you really mean what you say. You don't just say that to sound good. You really do make a difference in people's life, and you can tell that you're genuine. You're a genuine person, and that is very appreciated, especially in these time of days. So thank you for being such a blessing.
Well, I don't know that I'm a blessing, but you're welcome. Thanks for saying that.
You're very welcome.
All right, Cindi, please tell us about your encounters now. Give us every last detail that comes to mind.
Okay. So I just kind of want to give a little background. Before I relocated to Texas, I was from the Pacific Northwest, but my grandparents and my parents, they were all from Texas, and I had been my son's father, my ex. He was very abusive. So we separated when my son was like 1, but he still used our son to try and control me, and then started abusing my son. He ended up losing all his rights, and it was a very messy, horrible ordeal. I'm not a man-hater. I wish my ex would have been a great father, because children need both parents, but this was not my case. So he lost all rights to his son. It was finalized, I believe it was the end of December 2017. So I decided, for me and my son, because he had a lot of trauma and nightmares, that I was going to move back to Texas. I had some relatives, one that I didn't really know very well, but I do have relatives in Texas, but it was where my grandparents are all deceased and my parents. But I just thought, I'm going to move to Texas. So in April of 2018, I relocated. First, I went to Nacona and visited some relatives there, and then I settled and was staying with family, my cousin, in a small town called Joshua, Texas. It's in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. And I was staying with them until I could find a place of my own and got back on my feet. And, I was just starting over from scratch, but, I'm a very positive person. I was just looking forward to having a life without any negativity and that my son could thrive in. And so life was, going well. And I think it was about June, and I decided, I believe, it was a Avenger movie or some type of superhero because my son loves superheroes. And I decided we were going to go to a late movie. And also the movie theater has air hockey and games. So we watched the movie and we just had a great time. And afterwards we played air hockey and video games and stuff. And we were driving home to my cousin's house because I was still staying at my cousin's house at the time. And this area used to be all farms, and of course, Joshua and Burleson and all these towns are kind of growing together, but there's still homes where they have land with horses and animals, and there's a lot of farm market roads, country roads. And we were on one of these. It was Spring Valley Road, and it turns into, I believe it's Farm Market Road 913 or something. And they're kind of curvy and they're dark, and it was getting close to midnight, I believe. And we were just driving and talking about how awesome the movie was and what was our favorite superhero, just stuff that 8, 9-year-old boys love. And I was just enjoying seeing my son happy and no fear of his father or anything like that. And I was driving pretty slow because, like I said, it was dark and I knew there was a curve coming up. And my son said, "Mom, look at that dog with the huge head, and it's standing." And he meant like standing on 2 legs. And I'm like, "What?" And I thought maybe he'd just seen maybe a dog in the neighborhood or a coyote, because we had been hearing coyotes for a while. Because, like I said, in this area where we were driving, there's like pastures and there's some people who own horses and goats or other type of animals. And I looked over, and on this side there was like some type of business, like a machine shop or like a storage area, because I've seen boats and stuff, but it was under a light. And I believe there might have been a really high carport or something it was standing under, but it wasn't a regular carport. It was more of a business, so it was high up. And I looked, and I knew what it was right away. And I told my son, "That's a Dogman." And, I knew it was very important for me to be calm, because if I got upset, my son would get upset, because we had been through 4 years of counseling, and the counselor had told me, because whenever I would cry talking about, the abuse we had gone through, it would upset my son. So I always try to be very cautious of my emotions, because I don't want my son to be upset, because he's been through quite a bit with his dad and he's getting better. So I was really calm, and I wasn't going very fast, maybe 20, 25 miles an hour, and I did slow down more. And I will try and explain what it looked like, because I went to pull over. I don't even know why. I guess I was amazed, or maybe in a little bit of shock. I mean, I believed in it, and thankfully, like I said, I had watched Vic's show for a few years, so I knew they existed. And this Dogman, I had the impression it was a young male, because I've heard some Dogmen described as just like a football player or a body lifter, and this one was muscular, but it looked lean, about 6.5 feet tall, maybe close to 7 feet. I know it was probably at least, 6.5 feet tall, because I'm 5'10". My grandpa was about, I don't know, he was over 6.5 feet tall. So I know he was at least as tall as my grandfather. But I don't know if it was the hair on his back. It could have been hunched over a little bit, but it was tall. It had dark hair. It seemed to have a little bit of white mixed in with the dark hair that kind of made it look a little gray on top. And it seemed to have what I kind of call a mane. I don't know if people have ever seen a little Pomeranian dog. My sister used to have a few of them. and they have that fluffy hair all around their head you can see the ears pointed up. And this is what this Dogman looked like. It had a snout that protruded out, kind of, I guess, similar to maybe a German Shepherd. And he looked very well groomed. I mean, he wasn't an ugly Dogman. I've heard some people describe it and they sound horrible. This one, if I hadn't known how mean they could be or terrifying, you might even want to pet it, which I would never try to pet a Dogman. That's not what I'm trying to say, but it just looked well groomed. His mouth I could see his canine teeth. They looked quite large. I could see it looked like maybe some saliva or something. My son thought there was maybe a little bit of blood around his mouth. And it seemed to be kind of looking towards his left, like it was fixated on something, maybe, another animal or something. It had hands, not paws, and there were some big, long, I don't know if you want to call them nails or talons or whatever. I mean, this thing is made for killing and hurting people. It's not a cuddly forest creature. And like I said, I went to stop. Now, my son described it. He said his legs looked kind of funny, kind of like the backward dogs that people describe. And what I've seen of his eyes, they looked maybe like an amber-ish color. My son said they were red, so I don't know if maybe when we were driving up, the light was reflecting on them, because like I said, my son's seen them first. His ears didn't look overly large, but like I said, he had kind of that hair mane kind of around that kind of blended in with the ears. So they seemed to fit his face. I mean, it was a big head. I mean, his shoulders maybe 3.5 to 4 feet wide. I mean, it wasn't a tiny thing by any means, but it just stuck in my mind that it was a younger male for whatever reason. And I slowed down. And I was looking at it. It was maybe, when I was on the road, approximately 20 feet. I'm not real good with distance. And then when I pulled over to the side, maybe 15 feet away from me. So I did get a pretty good look at it. And then all of a sudden I realized, what am I doing? I'm in a convertible VW with a soft top. Not that it couldn't get into a hardtop car. And I'm putting my son in harm's way. I need to get my son to safety. So I decided to drive away, but also I forgot. It did have this kind of, I had a dog once that when it had his mouth open and his tongue hanging out, it looked like it was kind of smiling. But this Dogman seemed to have a devious, evil smirk, I don't know, on his face. Like he knew the fear or the confusion that he caused people and was enjoying it. I could be wrong. Maybe I'm trying to put human emotions onto that, but this wasn't just a normal smile that a regular dog can, look like it has. This to me has, this Dogman seemed to have intelligence far more than just a flesh and blood animal. I don't know what it is, but I remember on the way home speaking to my son about it, making sure he was okay. And it was almost surreal how calm I was, and I don't know why. I mean, I guess it was just because I had heard stories. I didn't want my son to have nightmares, and I knew if I freaked out, my son would freak out. And it did help knowing that Dogmen existed. It wasn't like I was surprised. What is this weird creature standing on 2 legs with hands? And I think I've heard people use the raccoon comparison to their hands, and I think that is a good analogy from what I've seen. He was holding his arms kind of out in front of him and kind of bent at the elbow. And, I went home to my cousin's house because at that time I was still living and staying with them until I found my own place. And, I did not tell my cousin or her fiance. He was a hunter, and I believe I had tried to bring it up to him before if he'd ever seen anything. And, it was kind of, I just didn't think they would believe me. And I guess I was just kind of confused why it didn't come after us, which I'm so thankful it didn't. But I think I had some guilt or or worried that people wouldn't believe me because it didn't try to get into the car, it didn't run after her car, or, because that's what I'd always heard. And I don't think it's because I'm not trying to say dogmen are not dangerous. I don't think I have a special connection to them. I do not want anyone listening to this to think for 1 minute dogmen are not dangerous, because they are. I think, like I said, when I looked at the dogman, it seemed to be fixated and staring at something to its left. So I don't know if it had some prey, something that is already wounded. I don't know. But for whatever reason, my son and I wasn't his main priority at that moment. And so I went home and I didn't even talk about it. I didn't even talk about it online until many, many months later. And then I do remember my cousin's neighbor, this is kind of all after the fact, telling us around the same time to be careful because he had seen a huge, big coyote. And I didn't really connect this till later, and I'm not trying to say it was a dog man, but he said, be careful letting because I have a little black and white Shih Tzu dog named Cookie who was born on Halloween, and he's my fur baby. So he told us, my cousin had a little poodle, to be careful to always go outside when we let our dogs out because he had seen a big coyote. And we had heard coyotes a lot, and they always seemed close. And my cousin had garbage. Their garbage was being torn open. They resorted to putting it on their horse trailer, which was, 6-7 feet off the ground. I don't know, but it would still get torn open and into. I don't know if it was raccoons climbing up. My cousin had mentioned she'd seen something really dark run really fast past the windows, and she had joked that maybe it was a ghost. And I'm just saying maybe it was a possibility the dogman was around her house and I didn't realize it. I don't know. I didn't see one there, so I don't want to say that. So my encounter with my son and I seeing the dogman was in June, and in the middle of August, I moved into an apartment. The apartment I moved into was approximately 2.5 miles from the Dogman encounter. And like I said, I'm starting over from scratch, so I'm living in an apartment, and I believe it was that fall, I don't know, maybe October, November. And I'm sorry I don't know the dates. Like I said, I kind of blocked this stuff out of my mind. Even though I knew they existed, I can't really explain why. Speaking with Vic last night, I think part of it was I was afraid people wouldn't believe me because the dogman didn't try to, get into the car or chase us. And I guess I was afraid people wouldn't believe me. And I don't know, or maybe it still takes a while to come to terms when you actually see a dogman. But I was in bed one night, and I had heard some commotion because my bedroom window, when you look out it, we have the grass area and trees, and then you'll see a fence, and you'll see a backyard and some homes. So there's some homes, and it's the back part of the homes, the backyard. And this night, I heard something big I heard some dogs going crazy. One of the neighbor's dog, it was whining and then barking, and it was late, and I'm pretty sure that night I was listening to Vic's channel. I was listening to about a Dogman encounter, and all of a sudden there's a growl, and at that time my head of my bed was right next to my window, and I could feel this growl in my body. And I've been to a safari zoo. I've stood in front of lions and tigers and heard them roar. I've heard cougars, and I've had cougars outside my front door before in Oregon. So I know what animals sound like. And this was not from any animal, and it definitely wasn't just a regular dog. And I did see this big shadow. I couldn't see it closely, but I just knew it was I could be wrong, but to me, it was the same Dogman, and I jumped out of bed, but you could just feel it vibrating. And in my mind, though, I felt like he was growling or roaring, or however you want to call it, at the dog, because he was mad that the dog had alerted to his presence there. Because I had no idea there was anything outside my bedroom window until he growled. And then it took off running, and it was something very big. And the apartment buildings are open, and the front of the apartment doors, they're covered. But, across the hall, there was something big that ran by. Because I got up, I was trying to figure out what it was. I did see something big standing in my window. It wasn't a person. It wasn't a dog. And the next day, of course, my dog was whining and acting funny. And even when we had a cougar outside our door, my dog would growl or bark, but my little Cookie didn't. He was kind of shaking. He didn't do anything with what I believe was a Dogman growling outside my bedroom window. The shadow part looked like it was the Dogman. I can't say for certain it was the same one, but I do believe it was. And the next day, I spoke with some of my neighbors, and they said, yeah, there was something big outside, and they didn't know what it was. And that year, I do remember hearing, even when I moved into my apartment, I remember hearing coyotes. They always sounded really close, really loud. And this year, sometimes you can hear them far off in the distance, but nothing like the year of my encounter. So I was always curious if maybe there's a correlation with coyotes and Dogman sightings. And so after the second time when the Dogman was outside of my window, that's when I started admitting my first encounter, and then thinking about, the neighbor talking about seeing a big coyote that year. He didn't say coyotes, he said one big. And from what I know, coyotes are not real big. I know wolves can get quite large, but I never went into detail with the man, because at the time I wasn't thinking Dogman at all. So then it was after that encounter when I started kind of putting stuff together, and then I started leaving in comments. But I guess it still took a while, which I don't like writing. I'm a little dyslexic. I'm a good reader, but I finally wrote to your channel. I had mentioned it to other channels, but then they didn't ever call back to record. There was one more channel, and also I didn't think it was very exciting and compared to other people's encounters. But again, I just want people to know that not all encounters or you feel like your life's in danger, but it's okay. You can talk about it. You don't have to be afraid of people not believing you. But I don't want anyone misunderstanding that I am not saying dogmen are harmless, because dogmen are very dangerous, and I don't want anyone being led astray to think that they won't hurt you, because I think someone was watching out for me and my son, or like I said, it was not interested in us that night, but they are dangerous. But, when I spoke with you last night, and I spoke with Vic, I've always been really calm, and I didn't think this really had affected me very, negatively. But through the course of speaking with Vic, I was able to realize, I was having trouble sleeping. I was nervous. Unfortunately, our apartments they don't have a washer and dry hookup, so you have to walk to the little laundromat on site, and, we have lots of trees, and there's times I've ran back to my apartment because, I was scared that maybe a Dogman was behind a tree. I seen a shadow, so I was letting fear affect me, and it was nice. And then also just trying to be calm for my son. But, last night being able to speak with Vic about my experience, I was able to be vulnerable, because it's, I felt safe talking to him and going through my encounter, and just kind of feeling maybe a little guilty, because I didn't feel like the Dogman was trying to kill us. But I don't know why. I'm not saying it wouldn't have if it got the opportunity. So that is my encounter. I'm sorry if the audience is disappointed. It wasn't a terrifying one.
Oh no, don't apologize. I'm so glad you did reach out to me and let me know about those experiences.
I am too, Vic, because you didn't do it in a pushy way. You did it in a very sweet way. You kind of just probed me like, Cindi, you said you don't have no negative effects, but why'd you block it out? I mean, you just said it in a nice, gentle way to kind of jar me into realizing, this did have some trauma still. And, helping me to kind of let the guilt out, because I felt guilty that I even pulled over on the side of the road to look at the Dogman with my son in the car. I felt, although I didn't stay very long, I was like, why in the world would you do that? And why didn't I take a picture? Because I always said I would not be that person who seen something, what most people would say that wasn't normal or paranormal or whatever, or a strange creature, and not take a picture of it. That didn't even cross my mind until the next day or so. Oh, and I did forget to mention this. The next day, when my son had seen the encounter, I did drive early the next morning. Of course, once the sun was up, I drove by. I mean, I knew that it wouldn't, because this thing, you could see it breathing, you could see its muscles. It wasn't a real living creature. I just drove by to see if there was anything I could have mistaken this Dogman sighting for. Maybe I was hoping there was something there that I could have said, oh, that was it. But of course there wasn't. And I have wrestled and wanted to stop by, and I think there's like some kind of mechanic shop or something there. Sometimes I've driven by a couple of times, and I've always wanted to stop and ask them if they've had any strange experience, but I've always chickened out. Because I know they'll probably look at me like I'm crazy, because I'm just curious to see if the people that own that business or whatever it is, if they've had any strange sightings or, happenings. But I've always chickened out. I've driven by, but I never stop to ask them.
I'm glad you didn't ask them if they had seen one. I don't think that would have gone very well. When you went back the next day to look at the spot where you saw it, did you think about looking for evidence like prints?
No. Well, I think I was too scared to, honestly. Because like I said, where the spot was, once I went around that corner, it turns into, you leave the city limits. So like I said, there's like a lot of houses with like a few acres, and I know there's this type business. I mean, and it wasn't very far from the actual, city park. City Park's probably 2 or 3 blocks from there. But no, I was too scared to get out. And I know I probably should have, but knowing that the Dogman was there just about around midnight or a little before midnight the night before, but I should have, but I was actually too chicken to get out of the car. But you're right, I should have, and I kind of kicked myself for not getting out.
I don't blame you for not doing it, so that's that. When your son brought it to your attention, did he seem to be more excited or afraid, considering that he knew about Dogmen beforehand too?
He knew a little bit. He seemed more confused, and like in counseling, when they had told me my son really goes off my behavior, so if I'm okay, he's okay. To me, it seemed like he was watching my reaction to see if he should be scared or what, And so that was another reason I stayed really calm, is because I knew if I would have acted scared, he would have been scared. Because I could tell he was scared, and he was confused. And, he was like, Mom, look at that, with the huge head. And it's, right. And I said, well, it's a Dogman. I mean, I know it was very calm, but I knew if I would have freaked out, which I was inside, he would have. And so I know my son being in the car really was the reason why I was so calm, because like I said, we had been in counseling for many years because of his father's abuse. So I knew how important it was for me to be calm, because I did not want to cause him to be more fearful than he was. And we talked about it, and I just said, you're going to be okay. And, since then, I've talked about it some, or I've tried to get him to listen. He doesn't really like listening to that. He's like, Mom, I don't want to think about it. Of course, he's 10 now. He'll be 11 in July. So, of course, he doesn't want to admit that, he's scared to go outside in the dark or other things. But he is. But I think because it didn't come up to the car and I was very calm, I think that played a big role on him not being as scared and not being as traumatized. But he has no desire. Like I said, I love hiking and camping, and he doesn't really want to go hiking or camping or anything like that. Either do I, actually. But I think I'm going to start taking baby steps after talking to you, because like you said, a wall or a window really wouldn't have stopped a dogman if it wanted to get us. I'm a very active person. I love life and I love being outdoors, but I've kind of let it rob me of that joy.
I hope you do go out and enjoy the wilderness and start camping and doing all those things that you used to do.
Yeah, maybe a cabin camping. I don't know if I'm ready for a tent yet.
I understand. Huh. And by the way, I hope your son realizes he's got a great mom.
Oh, he's a great son. He's mama's boy. I'm just not supposed to say that in front of his friends. No, he's a very good man. He's the blessing that came from all the negativity in that relationship. So I look at, he's the blessing, and I have a wonderful 23-year-old daughter as well, and they are the joy of my life, absolutely.
Well, there's nothing wrong with that. You just admitted that you used to be one of those listeners who wondered why eyewitnesses didn't take pictures of the dogmen they saw. Did you have the means to take a picture of it if you had wanted to?
Yes, I had my cell phone right in the console right next to me. And it didn't even come into my mind until afterwards, till like the next day or so. And it bothers me why. Why didn't I not grab it and try to take a picture? I can't answer that, and I kicking myself because I always said I would not be that person, and I was.
Well, I can answer that question for you. Human nature, that's why you didn't think about pulling that phone out. Don't be too hard on yourself. I mean, it's one thing to sit back and listen to an eyewitness talk about their encounter and say that they should have pulled out their phone and snapped a pic, but put yourself in that situation, it's a totally different thing. So, yeah, like I said, don't be hard on yourself.
Thank you. Well, it is true, because once I was going to pull over, and I think I'd already stopped. Then it was like, what am I doing? I need to get my son to safety. That mama bear instinct kicked in, and and I'm not a selfie picture phone happy person either. So it's not like I'm glued to it and always taking pictures. I don't know if that would have made a difference or not. But I know some people who say, oh, with cell phones, there's no excuse. But, when you're in that situation, your phone is not your first go-to thought. I mean, it wasn't mine at all.
Oh, no. Again, that's all human nature, so that doesn't surprise me in the least you responded that way.
And I've heard some accounts, I don't know if this is true, that they had a feeling if they had tried to take a picture that something bad would happen to them, and I'm not saying I felt that, but who knows? So, maybe the flash would have made him notice us more or something, but he knew, I just know he knew we were there. Like I said, he had that devious looking grin. I don't know. It just bothers me that I don't know how, and I can't prove that it was the same one, but I just have the feeling. I just know it was. I don't, I know that sounds crazy, but it just bothers me that how do they know how to find us? I mean, I don't know. And then the fear they seem to enjoy inflicting on people, that's not an animal characteristic. Usually animals, if you corner them or if they feel they're young or threatened, then that's when they will be aggressive towards you. It's not, or any animals I've been around, like I said, growing up on a farm, a family of hunters, that's not normal behavior for an animal to stalk you or to enjoy putting fear in you. It just seems to me they have a higher intelligence than most animals. But again, I just want to reiterate to the audience that I am not in any way trying to say dogmen are docile. They are dangerous, just because my encounter wasn't as frightening as most, or it didn't try to chase after us. I just don't want anyone to get a wrong idea. I'm not saying that at all. I just want other people to know that if they had a similar encounter to mine, it's okay. They're not all as frightening as some.
That's right. Not all of them are. It's good to understand that. How did listening to the show change for you after seeing that one?
Well, there is no doubt, and it helped me realize that you don't ever know how you react when you encounter one. Like I said, I would never be that person that didn't try and take a picture, or to me, how I didn't go home. I should have went home and been waking everybody up to tell them what I seen, but I didn't. So people need not to judge. Don't assume because people don't have the reaction you think they will. Don't assume it's false or they're lying. Because when you're in a situation like that, because I knew dogmen existed, I did believe in them before I seen one, and I still didn't react the way I thought I would. So just be supportive and don't expect a person to act a certain way, because you just really don't know until you actually see one. So I think I'm more a kinder listener to people, and don't try to say, oh, people don't act like that. So I think it's made me a kinder listener, having been through it.
Well, if that's the case, then it's all been positive, and that's great to hear.
Yes, and speaking with you did definitely help more than I thought it would, and it was definitely a blessing, and thank you so much, Vic.
Oh, you're welcome. You are welcome. Well, Cindi, we're about out of time, but before we get out of here, do you have any closing comments you'd like to share?
Sure. First of all, I just want to thank you for how gracious you are with your time to talk with people, to help them. And again, I just want to reiterate to anyone that listens to this, I'm not saying dogmen are friendly, and please don't think that, and do not ever try to approach one, and don't shoot one unless you really have to, because they don't look like they would kill easy. So be safe. And, I hope no one has to encounter one, because I wasn't out trying to encounter a dogman at all. And I know some people think you could only run into dogmen in the forest, but, I was actually in the city when I seen mine and not expecting it. So you can, I guess, have a dogman encounter anywhere, city, town, forest, etc.
Well, that's all very well said. Cindi, I can't tell you how much I appreciate you coming on and sharing those experiences with us. I really appreciate it.
Well, thank you, Vic. You've helped me tremendously, and thank you for letting me tell about my encounter. And have a blessed night, everyone.
Well said. Thanks again so much. Have a great night. If you've had a dogman encounter of your own and would like to speak with me, whether in private or on the show, please go to dogmanencounters.com and submit a report. I'd love to hear from you.